A very warm welcome to IDFC First Bank presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. I'm Ritwika Gupta. Tonight it's all about branding for small businesses, communication for small businesses. What can small businesses do to effectively communicate and market their products? On the show tonight, I'll be in conversation with Lulu Raghavan, President APAC, Landor. Lulu, it's a pleasure to have you tonight on ET Now Leaders of Tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to kick this off by asking you a very simple question. It might seem simple, but maybe not. Tell me, with the rapidly evolving world that we are living in, how optimistic are you about the business of branding, about the future of branding, especially in India?
I'm hugely optimistic. But of course, you would expect me to say that because I'm a brand evangelist and I believe in the power of brands. But Ritika, if you think about India's growth, we are a growth economy, and I passionately believe that brands are tools for growth.
Sure.
Therefore, the future of branding is very, very bright. Why do I say that? At their best, brands are incredible assets. One could argue that they're perhaps the most valuable intangible assets on the balance sheet.
Sure.
And if companies know how to manage them, protect them, nurture them, and truly leverage them for growth, they really can transform their own trajectories and achieve their ambitions through branding.
Fantastic. Lulu, in the course of this interview, I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions that are centered around small businesses. So tell me, over the years, how have you seen the definition of branding evolve? And why I ask this is because, is there a difference in terms of how a small business perceives branding versus how a larger brand would?
Actually, there should be no difference in the way a brand is perceived. But let me answer your first question, which is how branding has evolved and shifted over the years.
Yeah.
Before, it was a marker of identity. So if you think of Rolex or Mercedes or Levi's, some of these big brands, they signaled heritage, they signaled luxury or a certain lifestyle. But today, it's not a marker of identity alone. That's certainly one role, but it's an enabler of decision making. Why do I say that? Because there's been an explosion of choice. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, today you may have 30 different toothpaste brands to choose from, right? So when you have this explosion of choice and information, brands are a shortcut for decision making. That's the power of brands. So fundamental shift from being just a marker of identity to being a marker of identity, but also a shorthand for decision making for the consumer.
So I like how you spoke about identity, and I just want to extend that thought. Do you believe that it is mandatory for every business and brand today to have an identity, or is it an add-on for some?
Oh, Ritika, it's definitely not an add-on. It's an absolute must-have. There's a sea of sameness, as I was saying, in almost every category. Everyone sounds alike, looks alike. So how is the consumer going to make a choice?
Sure.
You as a brand have to stand for something. Our founder, Walter Landor, who pioneered branding in the 1940s, very famously said that products are manufactured in the factory, but brands are built in the mind. So as an entrepreneur, whatever business or brand you're building, you have to find a way to create those associations and get into the mind of your consumers so they can prefer you, purchase you, and pay more for you. That's the fundamental role of branding. I don't see it as a luxury, but an absolute necessity.
Sure. So then I just want to understand, for smaller businesses, that may not have the budget or the capacity to spend so much on advertising and marketing, what would your advice be in terms of the kind of strategies that they can adopt to, put their communication out there? And how can, the second part of my question, how can, a global agency like Landor, support such entrepreneurs to develop their own brand?
If you look at the word branding, Ritwika, it's quite interesting. There's brand and there's branding. Now, if you separate the two, brand is what you stand for. It's your story. It's what sets you apart. It's the value that you deliver to your customers. Branding is the signal system of how you get the word out there. Communication is one element of it, but the experience you deliver, how you talk about your products and services, what your name is, what your identity is, all of these form the signal system. So when it comes to budget, you don't need a whole lot of money to define what you stand for. The problem is many companies, many brands, especially entrepreneurs, don't spend enough time truly honing in on that story of their brand. They might have attributes about their product or service that are not very differentiated. They might be doing something unique, but they haven't told the story in a very unique way. So nailing your brand story doesn't require any budget. Then when you go to the signaling piece of it, developing a strong name, developing a visual identity system, a unique brand voice, how you show up in the world also could be done on minimum budget. You can use digital channels, your own media channels very effectively. That doesn't require a whole lot of budget either. You can build your website. Nowadays, there are lots of tools that entrepreneurs can use to tell your story well and organize your website. So the signal system is very consistent with what you want the brand to stand for. Where the budget comes into play is when you amplify the message through traditional advertising or through a whole 360 campaign that involves traditional as well as digital. But that's a last stage. The problem is many people start with that, forgetting that there are so many things that can be done on no budget or low budget to establish a very strong brand identity and build a very relevant and differentiated brand experience that could drive footfalls, that can enable you to connect much more deeply with your customers.
Fantastic. Lulu, at this point, I want to just zoom out a little bit, talk about the big picture. How well positioned do you think Indian businesses are on the global stage? And I ask this because, while on one hand we have the McDonald's, Apple, Zara, H&M, why are we not seeing enough of made in India, made for the world brands come out?
A very short answer, deep pockets. Their investment matters. You do have to have a lot of money, not just for advertising, marketing and branding, but for innovation, for R&D, to ensure that you truly have a product or a service that's relevant in so many diverse markets of the world. There are some encouraging signs of progress and growth. 20 years ago, we didn't have that many. But if you look at the IT space, for example, you have the Infosys and the TCSs of the world that have truly moved up the value chain. They've made a tremendous amount of effort to garner a lot more premium for the services that they offer because they've been able to shift perceptions of India being just a low-cost provider of IT services to being much more of a strategic partner to drive digital transformation. Another brand that stands out for me is Royal Enfield. I think they've done a lot to truly have a product that can resonate in so many global markets, and they've started their journey really well. But it all comes back to deep pockets as well as the mindset. A lot of the American companies, the European companies who've had decades of globalization understand the amount of investment it takes to truly have a global brand. So I think we're on that journey. Indian entrepreneurs are hugely ambitious, and now with digital tools available, I think it's a matter of time where innovative products and services from India will be ready for the global stage, and we'll see many more global brands from India. But I think we're about 10, 15 years away from that.
All right. And how well do you think it is, how important do you think it is, for brands today to understand cultures across the world? And because you have also worked, across APAC as well, right? So what is your understanding of knowing what other markets want, knowing what other consumers in other markets want?
Again, I would say hugely important. If we think about strong brands as needing to be relevant, relevance comes from deep consumer connect, deep customer connect. And that can't come from being a global brand with a global homogeneous culture. In the markets that you operate in, you have to have that cultural currency or cultural relevance. A global brand that does it really well is Coca-Cola. If you look at how they communicate and how they engage with consumers in different markets, absolutely phenomenal in terms of the variation in how they go to market. Even in India, if you look at how they celebrate the different festivals from different parts of India, I think they do a brilliant job. Another simple example is McDonald's. They could have just offered the same menu in every market in the world.
Yeah.
Would they have been as successful in many markets? Perhaps not. But if you think of India, think of the vegetarian menu, think of the McTikkie, and all of the other innovations. It's only when they were culturally relevant did their business truly take off. So cultural relevance is key, because relevance is what unlocks the power of brands. Relevance and difference create strong brands, and strong brands drive business growth.
Right. Well, it's time for a quick break here, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. Welcome back to IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. In this episode, we are talking all about branding and communication for entrepreneurs and businesses. In conversation with Lulu Raghavan, President APAC, Landor. So shifting gears a bit, I want to talk a little bit on about the women in advertising today in India. Talk to us about, firstly, what are the biggest challenges for women in advertising and marketing?
One of the challenges is visibility in the organization, and a large part of it perhaps is also the fault of women, because women like to do the work but don't like to talk too much about it. And when you are not visible, then you're denied those opportunities. So very often visibility is an issue. Second, I would say, is equal opportunity. In the boardrooms where those decisions are made, women don't always rise to the top. Maybe it's a function of that visibility, but equal opportunity is a huge challenge. And then I would say, as women become more senior in their personal lives, they also have a huge amount of responsibility. They have younger kids, they have older parents, they have to balance personal and professional so much more than men. And so managing that balance, being able to contribute meaningfully to work, I think is also a huge challenge. And then, of course, depending on the organization that you're in, there will be bias, gender bias. The environment may not also be conducive to women speaking up, to women calling the shots. The culture of companies may not be conducive to that. That's another challenge as well. But I do believe that in some, very often it's our internal barriers to advancement rather than the external barriers. Or another way to think about it is, we don't have any control over the external barriers, so we should dismantle all of those internal barriers, including self-limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, believing that you're not worthy of the opportunities that you deserve.
So then what would your advice be for young women who want to join advertising in India today? Is this the right time to join?
Well, of course, there's never been a better time for creativity to thrive, because I believe that with businesses needing to grow, that growth is going to come from innovation, and innovation fundamentally requires creativity. First, I believe that we have to fundamentally believe in ourselves. A lot of times there is so much self-doubt. Believing in ourselves, believing we are worthy, and believing in our inherent worth is extremely important. Next, I believe that you have to build up your expertise. You have to be the most competent person in what you're doing. And that requires hard work, it requires learning, it requires craft, honing, lots of practice, right? So building that expertise and being absolutely indisposable and thinking every day, what's the value that I'm adding to my organization is extremely important. I would say you also need to be resilient. You know, it's not a cakewalk. You'll have so many challenges, like we talked about. You know, work is hard work.
Yeah.
And so having that resilience to show up every day and soldier on, despite setbacks at the workplace or even personally, I think is extremely important. You also should find mentors. We can learn so much from those that have journeyed the path, so to speak, before us. So finding mentors and extracting a lot of value from your mentors is extremely important. And then I would say the most important thing is to be an advocate for yourself and for your work. And you can do that through being very visible about the value that you bring to an organization.
I want to talk about technology. How has that impacted the communication industry, especially when it comes to your online communication, advertising? What can you tell us?
So there's digital, social media and all the digital channels, and then there's technology that could be AR, VR, all of the other tools that you have. Digital has democratized brand building. I mean, think of the D2C brands that have been born today, right? Whether it's Boat or Mama Earth, or even the quick commerce brands that you have, are creating so much incredible value for consumers, and they've done it without spending boatloads of money. Well, some of them have in terms of taking the brands to the next level, but the initial ability to garner a huge audience much faster through digital channels. So today, anybody with a very unique idea and value proposition and the skills to connect emotionally with consumers can build a brand. You couldn't say that 10 or 20 years ago, where the FMCG companies who had deep pockets were the only ones who could build a brand of national scale. So digital has totally democratized branding. Digital is also a great medium where you can reach directly to your audiences, engage at a much deeper level. Storytelling is much more as well. So the whole texture and depth to which brands can engage and have a deeper relationship with consumers has changed tremendously. On the other hand, if you look at technology, technology has played a great role in changing the experience for consumers, whether it's your apps, your ride-hailing apps, your commerce apps. You know, just think of what you have, the power on your fingertips, and of course, the digital revolution in terms of mobile telephony and all of that has played a huge role as well. And then also if you think about technology in retail experience, personalization, the ability to imagine products and services without actually using them, you know, with AR headsets, etc. Huge quantum leaps in the way that brands interact with consumers to bring them into the fold. And I think the future will be a combination of physical, human, and digital touch points for any brand. And technology does play a role. The only watch out with technology is it can be the shiny new thing. So when it comes to technology, we shouldn't see it as the thing, but as an enabler. And brands that understand that the positioning, the storytelling has to be much beyond just a technology story will be the ones who truly use it. And then of course, technology is not easy to implement. It is complicated. So doing smaller experiments that then build up to something a lot more. So a lot more beta testing and the apps that you release, getting consumer feedback, and constantly evolving is the way to go. But I do think technology has fundamentally leveled the playing field in many ways for brand building, but also enhanced our ability to have much deeper connections with our consumers, whether it's in the digital domain or in the physical domain through experiences.
What advice would you have then for an entrepreneur who wants to get into this space, who wants to start his or her own little agency? I know, of course, they can't compete with the global giants, but you know, a piece of advice perhaps from your end?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is to be able to understand the aspirations of the entrepreneur, the clients that they're working for, as well as, understanding their anxieties. What are their problems? What's keeping them up at night? And how can we use the tools of branding, of design, of creativity to solve those problems? It's less about selling and having, some products that you push on your clients, but truly having more of a consultative mindset in terms of how you partner, how you guide, and how you use your expertise in branding and marketing to help entrepreneurs to be very, very consumer-centric in their approach and to leverage the power of design and storytelling to create demands for their products and services.
Great. And finally, Lulu, tell me, what is your vision for Landor as a brand here in India? And of course, the larger advertising communication industry. What can you tell us? What can we expect in the next 5-10 years or so?
Excellent. Great question. Thank you for asking. Like I said earlier, I'm very inspired by our founder, Walter Landor, who in the 1940s pioneered branding. So Landor's always been a pioneer in branding, at the leading edge of thinking on branding. And today I believe there's a great opportunity to truly be partners, trusted advisors to our clients, to help them leverage the power of brand to drive growth and transformation. So my vision would be to position Landor firmly as the most desired partner for branding and design. And it's the first place that clients call upon as their partner for growth. And equally from an employee perspective, the most sought after employer, so to speak, because we have a great culture, amazing opportunities to work on the most ambitious brands, and a lot of opportunities for growth from a very young age. And this, not only in India, but across APAC. I believe Asia's time has come, whether it's India, China, any of the other markets, Indonesia, in APAC, all of these markets have immense potential for growth, and the role of brands will be greater than ever before. So I'm very, very optimistic about the role of brands in driving Asia into the future.
Fantastic. This was a great conversation. I think we covered so many aspects. Thank you so much again, Lulu.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.